Novaheart welcomes you to our latest explainer. Today, we're looking at a genuinely transformative concept. Have you ever wondered why a child's meltdown just feels completely and utterly out of their control? Well, today we're equipping teaching assistants and nannies with the absolute essential tools to become a neurodivergent child's external nervous system. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the parallel journey we'll be taking today. First up, the biological reality. Then, the power of mirror neurons. And finally, the golden rule. Section 1. The biological reality. Focusing on the prefrontal cortex. Before we can even begin to offer support, we absolutely have to look at the internal biology of the child, rather than just brushing off their actions as, bad behavior. The prefrontal cortex is the actual literal biological hardware required for executive functioning and emotional self-regulation. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. It doesn't fully mature until a person reaches their mid-20s. Think about that for a second. This means your toddlers, your primary school children, and, even your teenagers simply do not have the biological hardware to self-regulate yet. They are entirely reliant on the adults around them.
And this brilliantly illustrates the beautiful complexity of the neurodivergent brain. Because these children lack this developed, automatic self-regulation, the adult has to literally step in and act completely as their external nervous system. You're not just helping them calm down, you are actually providing the neurological function they currently lack. It's like you're plugging in a missing wire for them. When we zoom in on brain function, we see these chemical messengers passing information around. For a lot of neurodivergent individuals, a lack of dopamine and noradrenaline makes processing executive functions incredibly difficult. Honestly, it's a bit like trying to watch a telly that just keeps rapidly changing channels all on its own. This just completely compounds the absolute need for an external regulator to step in and take charge.
So let's look at what this actually looks like in everyday life. Imagine a teaching assistant navigating a really noisy, chaotic classroom transition right between maths and break time. The child's lack of regulation here isn't them being naughty, it's a biological, overwhelmed state. Right, now mirror that directly to a nanny at home during the post-school decompression window. The child just completely collapses in tears from sheer fatigue. It's the exact same biological deficit, just presenting in two different settings. Both the TA and the nanny are witnessing a nervous system that is entirely run out of processing power.
Section 2. The power of mirror neurons. Looking at unconscious mimicry. Let's move to and see how this builds, as we are now shifting our focus from the child's internal biology to the relational exchange between the adult and the child. This brings us to the really fascinating science of autonomic somatic co-regulation. Mirror neurons are brain cells that unconsciously mimic the emotional and physiological states of the people nearby. Basically, two nervous systems literally sync up. What does this mean for us? Well, if an adult's stress starts to escalate, it's going to trigger an immediate corresponding mirror response in the child. Your tension literally becomes their tension. Here's what that looks like in practice. If a teaching assistant raises their voice and tenses their shoulders whilst trying to manage a situation in a really busy school corridor, they inadvertently trigger a meltdown. The child's brain is just mirroring the TA's stress. Now immediately parallel this to a nanny on an outing. If the nanny tenses up and speaks sharply whilst managing a sensory overloaded child near the supermarket tills, well, the child's nervous system matches that panic right back. The escalation is totally contagious in both of these environments. So that leads us to a pretty vital question. What do you actually say in the moment? Now, once you have successfully anchored your own nervous system, you need the exact verbal scripts to lower the child's tension without demanding too much processing power. I've linked a card right now to our Say This, Not That guide, which gives you those exact templates to use in the moment. Which brings us nicely to Section 3, the golden rule. Regulate yourself first. Look, you simply cannot pour from an empty cup. As our slide says, if you haven't taken care of your own needs, there's no way you're going to be successful with co-regulating. It's so true. Co-regulation is literally impossible if the adult is sitting there in a state of fight or flight themselves. Because the child's neurological filter is already completely overwhelmed, they will just sponge up your internal chaos. If you're frantic, trust me, they're going to be frantic. To be that much-needed steady presence, we rely on something called the Agile framework. Think of this as your theoretical foundation for acting as a neurological mute button. It starts with affect, which is intentionally conveying warmth and safety. Then comes gesture, making sure you maintain a calm, completely non-threatening posture. Intonation means dropping your pitch into a quiet, steady voice. Latency is a fancy word for simply waiting.
giving them ample processing time to catch up. And finally, engagement, ensuring a safe, secure connection is established before you even attempt to redirect them.
But how do you actually pull this off quickly in the heat of the moment? Well, here are 3 highly practical, extremely discreet steps that literally any caregiver can take to ground their own nervous system in under 10 seconds. Step 1. Take 1 deep, intentional breath. Step 2. Use a physical grounding action. Maybe take a sip of water or just press your feet firmly to the floor. And step 3. Consciously lower your posture and deliberately soften your facial expressions. You have to do all of this before reacting to the child's distress.
Let's look at our final mirror to see this in action. A teaching assistant can apply these 3 steps totally discreetly right at the front of the classroom during a sudden lesson disruption. They plant their feet, breathe, and soften their face before addressing the room. In exact parallel, a nanny can apply these exact same steps while standing mid-chaos in the family kitchen, perhaps whilst trying to prepare tea with a heavily dysregulated child shouting in the background. Plant the feet, breathe, soften the face. 10 seconds to reset. So the crucial point is this. You are the neurological mute button for both TAs and nannies. By making sure you stay grounded and managing your own mirror neurons, you essentially plug the leak. You literally lower the volume of a completely chaotic world so the child's system can finally regroup and find a moment of calm. Regulating your own energy is the vital first step. But we also need to make sure the physical spaces around the child aren't actively attacking their senses and driving them into fight or flight. Click on the video on your screen right now to learn how to implement sensory scaffolding, and I'll see you there.